Welcome to Derm-It Trotter. Don't swear about skincare, where host Dr. Shannon C. Trotter, a board-certified dermatologist, sits down with fellow dermatologists and skincare experts to separate fact from fiction and simplify skincare. Let's get started.
All right. Well, welcome to Derm-It Trotter. Don't swear about skincare. We're back here on the podcast today with a great friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Aaron Farberg. He's double board certified and as a dermatologist, as well as fellowship trained Mohs surgeon that specializes in skin cancer, inflammatory diseases, and cosmetic dermatology. He's an assistant professor at the University of North Texas Health Science Center, and he's the assistant program director for the dermatology residency program for Lake Granbury Medical Center in Dallas, Texas. And he's also Chief Medical Officer at Bayer Dermatology in Dallas. So I just want to thank you, Dr. Farberg, for coming on today and talking with us a little bit more about sunscreens and how we work with parents. So welcome to the podcast.
Of course. So excited to be here. I also tell really bad, lame dad jokes too. So
that is your
I try to
calling.
do it all. I'm here for you. Yes. Excited to be talking about some sunscreen and sun protection and all the other exciting things around that.
Well, I think it's a delicate topic because, I think there's a lot of attention sunscreens get now, especially around just what's in a sunscreen. What are the ingredients? Are they safe? So how do you really explain to parents what are in sunscreens and kind of, what you're comfortable with that they might use on their children?
Absolutely. Of course, especially when it comes to children, what we want is safety. What are we putting on them? What are the ingredients? What are the causes and effects of these ingredients? And we always just want to do our absolute best. First and foremost, if you're buying any of the larger brand commercially oriented type products, I mean, you think about Neutrogena, L'Oreal, Galderma, that's the Cetaphil brands, that's the La Roche-Posay and other brands that L'Oreal has. If you're buying any one of those, already I can tell you, you're in good hands, right? These are products that are in millions of people's hands, and the experiment is already being done every day by the beach. Lots of people are using sunscreens. If there was some, hidden, oh gosh, like there's something dangerous out there, we would all know about it. So first and foremost, that's the stress point of like, hey, these are safe. All right. So now we got to get into the little itty bitty details of, what are all in these sunscreens. And usually it's just a nice cosmetic base because we want them to be as comfortable as possible. Of course, nobody's made the perfect sunscreen that just feels absolutely perfect, but there's newer and newer technologies that are coming out. And then there is usually these UV filters, which are different ingredients that help protect your skin from the UV radiation. It's the sun. That's what's damaging our skin. And of course, there's different types, and we'll probably get into those. But for the most part, the ones that are approved here in the United States, they all go and are approved through the FDA. So again, they're in no hurry to approve things that could possibly pose any sort of risk. And so by and large, these are safe ingredients.
So when you have parents talk to you about, I see on the label, I see these terms like avobenzone, or I see, titanium dioxide or zinc oxide. How do you explain the difference between those ingredients to parents, especially if they're a little concerned? They've heard this, chemical type sunscreen versus physical sunscreen.
Right. And exactly. That's the big question right now. Are they chemical or are they physical blockers? And the reality is everything is technically a chemical. And so I know that's kind of a Derm-It Trotter type response, probably,
It is. You got
the
it.
smarty pants response is what it is. But, the reality is there are differences. The physical blockers are usually zinc and titanium. And those can just be better for patients that have a little bit more sensitive skin. But, the same concerns you'd have with the quote chemical blockers exist with the physical blockers. It really just comes down to a lot of the sensitivity. It also comes down to the cosmetic elegance. I don't think anyone's been able to make a really cosmetically elegant, that's the dermatology term, for a physical blocker sunscreen. And when, for the patients outside that are listening to this, that's the ones that create this sort of white sheen. When you think about like surfers in California and they've got the really thick white sunscreen on, That's the physical blockers. There has been some significant advancements with those blockers, and for the most part, they don't have to leave that white sheen, but it's still not quite perfect. We're not there. But which one is best? It's going to be the one that you use. So whichever one seems to be fitting best for your skin. If you're sensitive, perhaps you try the physical blockers first, but the quote chemical blockers work quite as well too, and they provide great broad UV spectrum protection.
So you just mentioned kind of the couple terms that I think a lot of parents are looking at that label. First of all, can you explain really what does SPF mean and what's the difference between like a 15 or a 50? And then what does that term broad spectrum really mean? And do you think it's necessary to have that on the label? Because a lot of parents ask me that, and I think we know the answer to that question. I'll let you give the Derm-It Trotter response though.
So many things to unpack there, and I'm glad we're getting to do this because oftentimes we'll have patients in our office, and we don't have that much time because we have a lot of patients that we want to see, and we want to help as many people as possible. And so patients then are left to sort of explore and discover the answer to these questions, and they often forget them by the time they get home. So what is SPF? It's a sun protection factor. What's cool about SPF is it's designed to be convertible to your type of skin. And so the way I put it is that, let's say it takes you 5 minutes before you get a little bit of a sunburn. Well, for every SPF you go up, it increases that amount of time that you could go under the sun. And so there's lots of variables there. It could be, you might be somebody that burns very quickly versus me who have darker skin. Hey, I don't burn as quickly. So the SPF will quote last longer or better in somebody like me. It also then depends upon where you are. Obviously, if you're in Miami under that direct sunlight, you're getting a lot more UV. You're going to need a lot more SPF versus, hey, maybe you're in Minnesota where you're not getting as much sun. But let me just remind you, you can be getting a lot of sun even through the clouds. Let's say you're up in Vail skiing, you get more sun up there than you do actually on Miami Beach because of all the reflecting and being so close to the sun. So that's what SPF is in a nutshell. What number are you going for? The answer is 30. You're going with at least 30. Lots of studies have shown that's the minimum to really be protecting your skin from skin cancer. Now, my patients ask, well, then is that all I need? Why is there 50? Why is there 70? Why is there 100? I actually did the FDA requested study on exactly that topic. And let me tell you the story. What we did is we actually went to Vail, where we were with a bunch of skiers. And we did a split face study where we had SPF 100 on one side and 50 on the other side. And everything was measured. We looked at how much redness happened, and you were 10 times more likely to have a sunburn on the SPF 50 side than you were on the SPF 100. Now, why did that happen? It's simply because most people are not putting on enough sunscreen and they're not reapplying. So now we're talking about maybe there is value to having more than just SPF 30. I tell my patients, if you're going to apply a really thick amount of sunscreen and you're going to reapply every couple hours, SPF 30 is all you need. But since I don't know of too many people that actually do that, let's up our game and do that SPF 50 or even the SPF 100. Lastly, you asked about broad spectrum. UV radiation, it's a bunch of different wavelengths, and you want to protect yourself against all those different wavelengths. And so that's where having a broad spectrum protection comes in. That's just something you want to be checking on the label. You don't need to get into all the crazy science behind that and what are these wavelengths. That's for all the dermatology residents. That's going to be on your boards. I'd suggest you study that. But for all of us else out there, really just look on the label. The FDA is good about making these easy to read and understand. That's something you just look for. Pretty much everything here in the US has that, and it's going to provide you the most protection.
So in addition to that, on the label, I have a lot of parents that come in and say, my kid, they're swimming all summer, they sweat a lot. Is there something, that truly is waterproof that I can use for sunscreen that might be a little bit better if they're in the water or they tend to be a sweater?
I love that question because I actually did this study too. We wanted to check on the durability of sunscreen. Now, the FDA will probably never change this label, and there's good reason where you want to always say reapply after a couple of hours. There's more reasons than simply, hey, let's pretend I made a sunscreen and it's so durable that even if you go jump into a lake, swim, towel off, it's still there. One of the main reasons why reapplication, because the odds of you literally covering all the areas of your skin on that first application are pretty low. Most people are not that thorough and they slather every square inch of their body. They're going to miss spots. If you've ever seen somebody at the beach, they've got a can of spray and they're kind of getting everything, but you know that they're not. The reason you reapply is that hopefully when you reapply, you'll get those other areas that you missed. But let's get back to that question about durability. Does it last more than a couple hours? Absolutely, it does. You're still going to reapply. Have I said that enough times? But the reality is our sunscreens have really technologically advanced, and they last much longer. In one of the studies that we did, we actually had them bike. And so they were sweating for 30 minutes pretty profusely. And then we also had them jump in and out of a hot tub, essentially an agitated water hot tub. And that's how you test for durability of sunscreens, where you can say they're, quote, waterproof or not waterproof. The word is water resistant. And again, they were even then, you can't towel off because that, of course, will wipe it off. But the question is if you used the SPF 50 and you jumped into the water and you were on your bike, what was the SPF by the end of the day? It was actually above an SPF 30, which gives you more reason to start at that higher SPF. If you started at a 50, by the end of that day, it was still a 30. Now, if you started at 30 and you went into the water and you sweat all that time, guess what? It dropped down to like an SPF like 8, 9, 10. So again, there was still some protection, but it wasn't as high as you need. So we answered several questions there that these sunscreens are quite durable, especially the ones that are well tested from the big brand names I've told you about. And then number two, that there's reason to start at a higher SPF because it gives you this extra margin of safety. But don't be too safe. You still need to be reapplying. Got it?
I think we got the message. That's pretty good. In addition to the application, if somebody says, well, how much sunscreen should I put on? Is there a way that you can describe to a parent, like to quantify like a eyeball or ballpark amount if you're putting it on the face or the rest of the body, just so they feel like they're actually applying enough to the skin?
Well, anytime I hear about like parents trying to apply sunscreen to their kid, I think there's this awesome meme of basically trying to apply sunscreen to an alligator that's going into one of those like rolls.
Yes.
It's impossible. You're basically slathering them around. Now, my kids, of course, are so perfectly well trained. They stand there and we just coat them and then they sit there for 15 minutes not moving until they can jump into the pool. Yeah, I'm lying, of course. So you're slathering them on. Essentially, what you need is a shot glass worth, and most people know what that size is. So like an ounce and a half to cover the body. For a kid, maybe you don't need that as much, but you just don't want to be stingy with this. Pretend like you're in the shower and you're taking, you're washing your hair and you use multiple pumps of shampoo. Don't be stingy with your sunscreen. That's often what I'll see is parents will buy a bottle of sunscreen at the beginning of the season, and it seems to last them for the entire season. You already know you're not using enough there, right? I'll go through sometimes a bottle in a weekend because, again, I live in Dallas, so we've got lots of sun. We need to use a lot of it. So you want to really cover all those different body parts area, an ounce and a half. You could do maybe about a dime sized, I'm sorry, not a dime, like a nickel size for the whole face. But again, everyone's a little bit different. If you have drier skin, it's going to rub in. If you're using one of those spray cans, those are great. Again, the goal with the spray cans, what I'll tell people is you'll spray it on, but you still have to rub it in, or do multiple layers, which again, those spray cans can get kind of expensive. So, don't be stingy with them. Go to Target or Walmart, buy the cheap brand and just, make sure you're coating yourself really well with it.
And do you tell parents when they put the sunscreen on, do you recommend that they wait a period of time before running out into the sun? Do you feel like sunscreens, people talk about that sort of kick-in effect. Do you give them a time frame to sort of wait for before it starts working?
It definitely starts working the moment you put it on. The issue is, of course, if you put it on and then just go jump into the pool, a greater portion of it can be washed off. If you're putting it on while you're sweating, again, there's a greater chance that it's going to get wiped off or rub off. So again, in an ideal world, yes, put it on. I think we talked about this joke. Put it on and have them sit there and absorb it in for 15 minutes. Good luck. It's kind of like when they jump out of the pool and they toweled off and they're kind of running around and you're chasing after these kids. Just slather them. It's not going to be perfect. That's why you're reapplying. Again, I can't stress that enough. You're going to miss spots. Don't panic. One time, look, even the dermatologist, I realized I missed my eyelids and I was out in the Florida sun, and no joke, I got burns on my eyelids, right? So like it happens to us too. I mean, Dr. Trotter, you've gotten sunburns, right?
Oh, yeah.
You have. See,
Don't
okay.
live it
See,
down.
we can all admit that we've all had a little bit of a burn here and there. You just do your best. It's like drinking wine, everything in moderation.
Boy, we've got a theme here, shot glasses and wine, but we're going to finish it off with, for the kids that don't love sunscreen, for those parents that are like, what do I do with, my kid just won't let me put it on. They don't like the feel. What other measures besides sunscreen do you recommend as a part of like a complete sun protection regimen? In the few minutes we have left, what would you tell parents to add in?
That's huge because I actually did a study on exactly that, where what we compared, it was actually by Lake Louisville here in the Dallas Fort Worth area. We had patients or subjects that were sitting underneath a sun umbrella, and you'd love this. We actually moved them so that they stayed right in the middle of the shady spot as the sun went over them, right? So like nobody does that, but we wanted to say, hey, what if we just kept them under the shade? And then we had another group that had SPF sunscreen. And the reality is the sun or the sunshade, the umbrella only provided an SPF of about like 6, which is not that great. It's still better than nothing. But what was also showed was that the subjects that had the sunscreen and were under the sun umbrella, some of them still got burned. So the reality is you need to be doing everything you can, multiple different avenues to help protect yourself from the UV radiation. Your question is, what are those? Well, seek shade. Okay, that's kind of obvious, but you're out there in a park, out there in the middle of the beach. Not always an easy place to get shade. So bring one of those umbrellas, find a shade structure, find a park with a shade structure. And hey, don't go out when the sun's the brightest. Think 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock. It's pretty in Dallas. We don't have a choice. It's 100 plus degrees. That's the only time you should be going out because otherwise you can't breathe. It's so hot. Um, think about UV protective clothing. The clothing technology has gotten to be so advanced and so good. I mean, think about the fishing and the golf technology. I mean, you could wear long sleeves in 100-degree weather and actually feel cooler with some of these shirts than if you were to have no shirt on at all. So wear protective clothing. Did I mention sunscreen? Oh yeah, we definitely mentioned sunscreen. And then also don't forget your eyes. Use some cool shades. You be a movie star and wear those cool shades. All these things combined, you're gonna be okay.
And lastly, I think you've summarized it, to a T, like of everything for the sun protection. You've kind of hit on those sunscreens, the main points. And I think, the big thing is, just getting parents to get out there and get motivated and probably set the example. So if you're setting the example, my husband always laughs. It's me and the 5-year-olds wearing the sun shirts out on the beach. So I think that's probably the only thing that I would tell them, set the example and kind of follow all the things that Dr. Farberg just mentioned to you. That's really kind of our goal here, is to really just kind of, work with parents too. I think as dermatologists, we're not trying to be the enemy, but, partner with you to help your kids stay protected, wouldn't you
It's
say?
It's all in moderation. Again, I know we go and we lecture all across the country and the world, and it's always fun when we go to these dermatology meetings in like Hawaii or Florida, because you can definitely spot whose kids are dermatologists. But
You got
you don't
it.
want to be one of those dermatologists that gets fired for making too many rash decisions. So
You got it. There you go. You got the dad joke in. I love it. Well, many
gotcha.
thanks to Dr. Farberg for coming on the podcast today. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Dermot Trotter. Don't swear about skincare. We'll have more coming up, and we'll definitely have Dr. Farberg on again.
Thanks for listening to Derm-It Trotter. For more about skincare, visit dermittrotter.com. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with anyone who needs a little skincare sanity. Until next time, stay skin smart.